Hi, welcome to the October 22nd, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and I'll make sure everything is coming through. Then we'll go ahead and get started. Just check my monitoring computer. Hi, welcome to the... Okay, everything sounds good on that end. So my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. And I'll be the host. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you're watching the live stream, please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you're from. So it's always great to see people from all over the world. And if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions, you could type it into the chat field or submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We'll try to go through all the questions as completely and succinctly as possible in order. My ability to answer questions in a real-time manner, I will get behind, sometimes 30 to 45 minutes behind the live questions. So, if I haven't gotten to your question yet, I will try to get to it as long as it's in. Once in a while, I may lose questions because it'll get too far back and I'll lose some of the questions. I'll apologize in advance if that happens. But I just wanted to, and also if you haven't gotten your question and you don't get an immediate response after asking it, just if you could be patient, we'll probably get to it. So if we could try to avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be helpful because that just kind of slows down the whole process. And when asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase, if it's Cubase Elements, if it's Cubase 11, Cubase 10, Cubase 9.5, and which operating system you're running, that information is helpful as well. I want to give a special thanks to several people. So we have two people that will serve as moderators. We have Jazz Dude and also Agent K. So they're volunteers. They're not Steinberg employees, but they're incredibly gracious and kind to kind of help people and do some moderation in the chat field if needed. We usually have a really well-behaved group, so I appreciate that, and so kudos to them. Also, if you're looking for another wonderful resource, a collection of Steinberg information, you can check out the Cubase Nation Discord. And Jazz Dude does a lot to compile that information for the benefit of our community. We should have all of the topics posted later tonight. It'll take several hours after the live stream. So maybe around 10 p.m.-ish U.S. Eastern time, we should have all of the topics posted on with timestamps. So if you wanted to quickly go back and review a topic that was covered, that should hopefully be posted and pinned to the top of the comments field. And if you want to search for previous live stream comments, I think we've done over 13,000 questions. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and Neon from Stockholm has been kind enough to create that resource for our community. So thanks to all of those individuals, and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first question. Can you please explain how I can loop playback in Spectral Layers Editor when I use it with Nuendo in ARA mode? When I mark a selection, activate loop selection, the playback is not looped. Okay, so let's say I will just do something here. And so it may be under ARA that it actually follows the transport of the host application, but let's take a look and see if we could get that set up. So let's say I'll just take this particular drum loop here and I want to go into my ARA. One other quick note, I had just my computer, I just had to do an OS update from our IT. So this is my first live stream on a new OS. So, but hopefully everything will work as expected. Okay, so let's say if I want to just set up kind of my loop here for this particular event. So, and now when I kind of hit P. Okay, so that's kind of looping as we see there. Now let's say if I just wanted to go to transport and let's come over here and we'll just loop the selection here. Okay, so let's say if so, but let me just see if I just kind of play. So it might be that the looping might follow just the whatever the main when it's running in ARA mode. So it looks like we could loop kind of just that particular selection, but the main transport bar in ARA may be tied to the host application. I could do some research on that if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. But if you wanted to just, you know, loop a particular selection, so I'm not sure if that is like the transports will synchronize through ARA or not, but I could do some research on that. So if you want to email me. Okay, so we see we have Uno Memento from Finland. We have David Griffiths, who I think is in the UK, from Wales. Yeah, so it says, thanks for the whole crew making these live streams so inclusive, informative, and friendly. So thanks. We just do it to help people out. All right, so question from Uno Memento. What would be the best way to put ISRC code and other metadata on a CD? Is it possibility in Cubase or should we use Wavelab, for example? So when we were dealing with ISRC codes, Cubase doesn't do that because it's, you know, kind of a part of the CD burning process. So if we go to Wavelab, it could be handled there quite easily. So I'll just go ahead and we'll open up Wavelab. Okay, so I'll just come over here and we'll just create an empty. In Wavelab, I will do a new audio montage. Okay, I'll insert a number of different files here. So as soon as I have these in my montage, I will go to the CD tab here and let's go to our CD wizard. And once we have your CD wizard here, you could actually have the ISRC codes, and that's where you could place it in. So again, once you just come here to the CD wizard, you'll see, and that's where you could just put in the ISRC code directly at that point. Okay, so we'll go back to our next question. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you do learn a tip or trick throughout the live stream, make sure you do hit the like button, and that enables us to continue to do these live streams. Okay, let's get to our next question. Okay, we have a question from David Griffiths. What would be, is there a way to improve accuracy when altering automation lines with the pen tool? Example, Control Alt and click. I want to dip dBs and return to the same, but I can't get back to the exact dB as before. So I think the easiest way to do this is, you know, maybe not with the pencil tool, but let's say we have our automation line on this particular event. If you grab the range selection tool, you could just kind of just, take your range, and as the range is defined, if you go to the upper center, you could just adjust the range like that. So let's say even if I wanted to draw in some different automation values here, so let's say, so even if I wanted to just take that range and decrease or increase, we could do that, and then it'll just return to the previous value very easily. So let me know if that works for you. So, just instead of, doing a fine tune. So I think if we want to do, I can move the value here. And I don't think that there's kind of a fine tune control, but try just selecting it, and then you could adjust directly there. So, and also one other thing that you could do if you wanted to take just a whole section of automation here. I think if we select the events like from the bottom, that you could see the value here, and you could increase or decrease. So that would be with the object selection tool as opposed to the range tool. So if you wanted to kind of select from the bottom, we could now increase and decrease the volumes like so. But I think the range tool kind of sounds like what may work for you. But let me know if that helps or if that's not what you want to do. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so we see from Scambot Terminator, how can I import each individual drum channels from Easy/Superior Drummers as they show individually in Cubase? I'm still using Pro 10.5. So I don't have Easy Drummer, but I think what you could do is it's probably pretty similar here. So let's say if I have a Groove Agent kit. All right, so let's say if I just open up a particular kit here, all right, and so now if I look at this, we can, so let's say this is our kit that we have set up, and if we wanted to map this out, first thing you could do, and this will be slightly different, and I don't have a license of Superior or Easy Drummer on this computer, but if you go to where you see the VST instrument here, so you see Groove Agent, and then you'll see just to the right, here you could activate all of the outputs that are available on the instrument. So now when I go to my mix console, we can see that we're going to have our Groove Agent and all of our outs. So we have, I think, 32 stereo outs from Groove Agent, and how you kind of map may be different per per instrument, but here I could take all of my kicks and I'll just say, okay, I want these all to go out of output 2. I want my snares to go out of output 3, hi-hats output 4, and toms output 5, overheads output 6, output 7 for room. So at this point, if I played a pattern, all of these different sounds would be mapped to different outputs. So I'm not sure how to do that off the top of my head. I don't have the ability to show it within Easy Drummer, but I think it would be pretty similar concept. All right, so we see in the mix console, does the signal generally flow from top down? So, if you're looking at it in the mix console, let's say the large mix console where you hit F3. So generally the signal will kind of follow the signal path from the top to the bottom. So here we'll see kind of your input routing, inserts before EQs by default, and that could be switched, and then going to sends and then to groups. So generally, and if you're looking at the full mix console, if you're looking at an individual channel, we could often think of it going left to right when we're in the channel editor. But in the full mix console, we could think of it going top to down. So that's a good assumption. All right. And see periodically my chat field will jump on me, so I'll apologize in advance for that, like it just did. All right, and I see just follow up from Chris. I know the signal flows in each channel, but if you change the routing from the signal to the first hit of the strip before inserts, for example, the order doesn't change in the mixer. So yeah, generally it's not going to, it'll be kind of fixed in the mixer, but so it may not reflect if you come to the particular channel and then have the channel strip before the EQ position, so that won't be reflected, but that's a choice that you could make, so just kind of be aware of that. All right, so you see Jan from Stockholm's on the live stream. All right, and we have Detlef from Dusseldorf. Okay, so we have just a question. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to install Cubase with all of its extensions on an external hard drive? What do I have to pay attention to? So I haven't tried this in a long time. I think the actual Cubase program is pretty small. For it's like 700 megabytes or so. So it's not like a huge thing for if you're like short on hard drive space, and then you could have all of the content, which could be like another 30 gigabytes of data installed by default to a different drive. So sometimes it may not pick up like all plug-in paths by default. So you may so I think if you install it to, like, let's say if you're on Windows, to a D drive instead of the C drive, the system drive, that you may have to manually go through and install the plugin paths. But maybe someone that has tried it could comment. But I think I've seen some people I believe do it and kind of read about it on forums. Most people will kind of keep it to the default system drive and move content if you're having space problems with that. All right, so see Juha from Finland. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. All right, we have Michael Pierce checking in from the UK. And we have John Costigan from Kenosha. All right, so we have Ken Coleman, Northern Virginia. It's like, hey, Greg, I have an E-licenser dongle that I'm getting an error when Cubase loads. No enough permissions. It still seems to work fine. I ran the LLC tool, but the message persists. So, if you're running, if you're running, you don't indicate if it's if you're on Mac or PC. But if you're running on Windows platform, maybe try right-clicking the E-licenser program and see if you run as administrator, if that changes it. All right, so we have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. Thanks for joining. All right, and we have Matthew Elston from London checking in. Thanks for being a part of the community. All right, and we have Sir Robert from Atlanta and Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. So we see, hello, Greg. Is Cubase can be connected with some drum controller like MPC 3000 to control Groove Agent 5? So yeah, anything that's kind of outputting MIDI data, you can just come directly over and play. So it could be any thing that's transmitting MIDI, whether it is a a virtual keyboard. So if I wanted to come here and be able to audition different sounds. So let's say, and I could just kind of switch. Go down one more octave so I could play. Or if I just want to use pads on my MIDI controller or keys. So a lot of people who do drum programming like the feel of the MPC pad. So you could definitely use that as a controller and be able to transmit all of the velocity directly over. So, anything that will transmit MIDI, you could use to play sounds in Groove Agent 5. All right, so we see for music all day, it says, Greg, I remember when you did the Cubase meetings at the Recording Institute here in Detroit, Michigan. Yeah, I miss going out there, seeing Lauren and Bob Dennis. I know he's passed, but I always loved going to Detroit and going to the Recording Institute. So it's great. I'm glad that you could join us for the online. So we're hopefully looking forward to someday getting back out in the field where we could do those in-person events. All right, we have Soren from Sweden checking in. Okay, so we have a question from Best Korean Jesus. It says, my question relates to creating the loop area or contents in the loop area. When I change to BPM, the loop area or track doesn't resize. Is there a way to have it match the tempo? So let's say if I wanted to take this loop here, and I'll just solo this file, and I'll turn the click track on. So as we do this, we hear that that's not kind of matching the tempo. Okay, so all we have to do, and so let's say if this was looped and it's not kind of matching the tempo with the music. So, what you could do at this point is just if you don't know what the tempo is, a lot of times loops will have the tempo in the actual field here. So, but if you don't see that, or just audio. So if I listen to this, I can say that this is going to be 8 beats of audio. So just I'll turn off the click track and we can count the number of beats. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2. All right, so as we do that, now we can go to the project menu to beat calculator. And I'll just say, okay, we want this is going to be 8 beats a minute. And we can say, okay, that's 137 beats per minute. So if you go to the media bay, if you don't know what the tempo is of the audio file, you can go into the pool window rather, and just make sure that you could enter the tempo value in. And then once you're there, you could enter musical value, or we could, at this point, select the event and put it into musical. And so as we play now, that will automatically match the tempo. So if I come here, and now I could have the loop fit for 2 measures. And if I change the tempo here from, let's say, 108 to 122, that it will just kind of speed up and match the tempo. So make sure you know what the origin tempo was. If the origin tempo, if it's a loop that was purchased, probably has that as metadata that Cubase could read. Just place that into musical mode, and then it will time stretch in real time to match the project tempo. So. Okay. Okay, so we see from Mark Davenport, if writing without a metronome, rubato, how can you get your tempo to line up with your music and make sure the notes are in the proper measures in the score? So, one way, there's a couple ways to do this. So I think I may have like a quick MIDI example here. Okay, so you could do it kind of automatically or manually. So let's say if we have something that's, and this isn't necessarily following the click, like played without the click. So one of the things you could do if you wanted to do it manually, I could just kind of move this to the top and we'll activate our time warp tool. So at this point, we could just kind of look at the MIDI data here and say, this is where measure 2 falls. So I'll place this event maybe not in musical mode. So we say, you know, right now we could move the measures to automatically fit the event. But probably the easiest way to do it is to just select the event here and go to project and go to tempo detection and analyze. And then it will go through and make a tempo map automatically of the performance for you. So, and then once you do this, it may put the time signature in 1/4. So I'll say, okay, I want to come here and let's say we're going to start right at this measure and this will be our 4/4. So now that I go into the score menu, we can just see that even though the tempo is constantly fluctuating, that we could have a steady score to accommodate fluctuating tempos or rubato performances. So try going again to your project to tempo detection after selecting the event, and Cubase could automatically do extract the tempo. All right, so we have John from South Wales, or Wales Sales, or Walesalis. All right, we have Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California, and it's great to see Gareth on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. And we have Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. So hopefully it will he will dispense of the virtual ice creams. All right, and we have Razel from Denmark. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see how can I make sure that I'm getting the best settings for Vari audio, as it seems to default to standard solo. So, you know, basically when you start doing Vari audio work, what's going to happen is, you know, Vari audio is dependent and it does its pitch, you know, detection and pitch correction using the standard solo mode. So that's the one that you're going to be using for Vari audio. So, you know, so that's kind of, you know, deeply tied into that algorithm. I think that you'll find that it sounds great. We see Gareth is saying, I'm Colonel Greg. So, all right. And we have Jason Sykes checking in from South Shields, England. Great to see you on the live stream. All right, we see from Jan says, thanks, Greg, for your smart and creative nudge command in the last Hangout to split long MIDI notes to specify the length. For those who missed the solution Hangout, it's at 3 hours and 46 minutes, 17 seconds. I'm glad that worked out for you. I'll show you another trick probably later today towards the end. All right, so we have Alexander checking in from Moscow. All right, so we see a question from Alexander. As I can understand from the last stream, if I was to add instruments to the group, add some effects to this group, and then I also need to add VCA to this group to control the volume rate? Not necessarily. So let's say I'll just do a new project here. so let's say I'll just all right, so let's say if I have this particular instrument and this is going to an effects channel. So let's say, okay, I want to put this on, let's throw in some chorusing or a phaser. So we'll come over here. All right, and now if I wanted to add these to a group, so I could select these tracks and let's add a group channel to the selected. Okay, so now when I come here, so if I, adjust the volume of Halion Sonic, I could adjust that. If I adjust the volume of the group, we could adjust the volume of the group again without having to have a VCA. So when you'd want to use a VCA is if you had like extensive automation, or if you had a lot of effects working on effect sends and you didn't want the effect sends to to actually change. So let's say if I come here and I'll just make the phaser really pretty obnoxious in the sends. So when I come over here, all right, and I will make that mix there. So let's say, so, if I have this, that will affect kind of the gain structure of that going into the sends, but we can still control the volumes. So if you wanted to bring everything down and still, have the same amount of gain going into the effect send here into the effects, that's when VCAs can benefit. But you could lower the volumes with just the actual track or with group channels as well. All right, so we have Shane Hay saying hi from the UK. Thanks for joining the live stream. All right, so we see that Jazz Dude is saying that the Discord has 997 members, so we might hit 1,000 today. So if you haven't joined the Cubase Nation Discord, definitely check it out. We can hopefully get to 1,000 users today. Okay, so we see from David Evans, hi Greg, checking my Steinberg account under supported devices at Cubase 11 Pros is compatible with Windows 11. I just wondered if that is what you heard or been made aware of. So I did see, I think it was maybe on late last week, maybe Friday or Tuesday, I did see an email come from the support manager. So I don't think it's officially supported, but what they had indicated and shared with us is, like the audio interfaces are officially supported in Windows 11. They're still going through all the quality assurance tests for Cubase Pro 11. It's a pretty extensive set of tests that they do for new operating systems. And they're still in that process, but they haven't come across anything that's been bad yet. So we see from Joe K, can we ask any Cubase related questions? Sure. So there's no real official topic other than trying to get your questions that you have answered. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, can I add my own MIDI pattern in the chord pads and play with it? So let's say, okay, I want it to come here And let's say I'll just play a horrible piano part. Okay, so now if I go to the chord pads, so we'll just come over here first. I will say, okay, so if I wanted to, audition through different chord pads. But once we're here, we could also just, let's go click on the player options. So okay, so I'll just say our player modes rather. So let's go to, instead of playing chords, we could do pattern. And then if I wanted to now just kind of take this particular pattern, I could drag and drop. And now as I play back the chords, so that's how you could kind of take your own musical patterns. So once again, click on the edit key and you'll see player modes. It may say playing chords there. Just do patterns, and at that point just drag, and then you'll see the drop MIDI part, and then you could take your own kind of user patterns, even something as horrible as I just played, and then have that as the basis for the patterns on the chord pads. You see Gareth is indicating he only does top-down mixing in the summer, so that's a good methodology. I would agree with that. All right, so we have Lithuania checking in. Thanks for watching the live stream. Okay, so I just see from Joe K, I have multiple sessions for each track. All of the tracks are recorded at different tempos. I want to pull all those tracks and tempos into one session. How could I do that? All right, so I'm just saying multiple sessions for each track. All the tracks recorded at different tempos. So let's say if I'll just go ahead and import some audio files here. So let's say, okay, so let's say if I had all of these tracks, and I'll just put a space between these tracks real quick. Okay, so let's say, these, if I had these tracks, so if you wanted to do it in a if each track had its own tempo into one session, really all you'd have to do is, when you go to the tempo track, here you could say, okay, we go to the start, this tempo is 115 beats a minute, and we could just say, okay, we want this to step, and the next, we could have our different tempos for each of the tracks kind of just laid out for you directly there. So you could adjust kind of all of the different tempos for different tracks. So, this way you have multiple projects. I'm just going to reread it, make sure It says I have multiple sessions for each track. All the tracks are recorded. Yeah. So, and then all you have to do is tell Cubase, you click right here, and then Cubase would follow the tempo changes for each of the tracks as they come in. So you don't have to have it into separate projects. They could all be one project, and you just have the tempo changes. So you could just right click, add a tempo track, and if you need to, change the tempo track, I think if you come over here and Command T, that could open up like a standalone tempo editor as well. But yeah, so you could have one project with multiple songs in it, and then just have it do the tempo changes accordingly. All right, we see Michael Teams is already started working with dispensing virtual ice cream. It's always appreciated, Michael. Thank you. Okay, so we see morning. How can I save and use templates to get started right away? Also, thanks about the last question I sent. That worked, so that's great. Thanks for letting us know. So if you have everything kind of set up in how you want as a template to start off, so let's say I'll just come here and let's say this is my template that I'll be like, okay, this is my song. I would just go to your file menu and go to save as template. So at this point, all we have to do is say, okay, I want to call this template. Okay, so we'll call it Felix. So at this point, I will, when I go to a new project, you'll see the hub should pop up. And then under more, this is where you'll see your templates. And then you could just come right over here and save and open up and choose Felix. One thing to be aware of is to make sure that, before you, if this, that templates can refer to, the audio events and MIDI information. So it could be that you may want to erase all of the media directly in the project first and go to the pool window under media. And at this point, you could say remove unused files, and then you could save the template. Otherwise, every time you start with that template, it may reference audio files or may load up unwanted MIDI information, which may not be what you want when starting from like a blank slate of a template. All right, so we have Luca joining from Germany. Thank you for being here. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, can audio alignment be useful for between different instruments? Certainly. So, if you have different instruments that are, kind of rhythmically, similar. I don't think I have a good example, but, it's not limited to being the same type of instruments because it's really kind of based upon more of, the actual kind of rhythmic nature of the audio files itself. So, so let's say if I wanted to just go over here, and for those who haven't seen the audio alignment functionality, I'll just kind of show it here. So let's say if we want to, where we have audio files that maybe aren't as tight rhythmically. So what we could do is we'll go to the audio alignment panel, which we could access right here. I could say this will be our target, our reference file. And we want all of these to be, the targets to follow that particular file, and we could add multiple targets at once, and then you could just say align audio. But the same principle will work for different instruments as well. So now, and you could tighten up the performance. It's often used for vocals, but not limited to working with vocals. All right, so we have Stefan from Sweden joining us. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Razel. In Very Audio, there's some little black warp marker when I edit the end or start of the phrase or word. What is their function, and when should we use it? Okay, so let's say if I wanted to come to a particular phrase here, and we go to our Very Audio, so... Okay, and I'm going to go ahead. I usually change the smart controls here to show all smart controls, and I'll make it just a little larger so it could be a little easier to see for you guys, for all of the viewers. All right, so when I come here, we could choose, if I wanted this phrase to start earlier or later, I could just kind of warp it. So let's say we come here, and I'll just solo this just so we could hear only. So, if I wanted this to start a little earlier, just kind of change the rhythmic characteristics of that, that's when we could do it. So, this way you could even just kind of take I want to take that note and just kind of scrunch it down. And then we could say, okay, I wanted to take this. So, we could kind of do rhythmic correction, so a lot of times, and what I love about Very Audio is people think of it as being pitch oriented, but, you could do a lot of work here rhythmically, just kind of changing stuff. So if the performance was a little early or a little bit late while you're here doing pitch correction, you could just adjust that. Or if something was just a little too loud, you could adjust the volume just on that one particular segment. So the warping is going to allow you to basically change the start and kind of fix rhythmic or timing anomalies within the recording. And that's really the intention of it. All right, thanks for all the great questions. Again, if you learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. And we do these live streams on Tuesdays and Fridays. All right, we see Michael Teams is on the case. He's being very proactive with ice cream today. That's great. All right, we have Cedric checking in from India. Thanks for joining. All right, so we have a question from Soren. Does it matter if I edit Very Audio in a stereo file, or should I split up into mono first? It's a stereo file from a mono source, just a mono mix down to a stereo done. So it doesn't really matter if it's, the channel width, if it's mono, stereo, or 5.1. What's really critical is that the file, Very Audio is intended to work with kind of monophonic material. So if it's mono or stereo, it's no problem. All right, we have Millard Brown checking in from Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we have a question from Shane. I was thinking of buying the Icon QCon Pro XL to assist with mixing. Will this work well with Cubase 11 Pro? I know it's Mackie control and works via USB, which is what I want, and hands-on knob. So yeah, it's a very popular control surface. You know, the Mackie control protocol is widely used and supported. So, you know, it's, you know, for that level of price point, you know, it's, you know, for hands-on control for mixing, that'll probably be a great solution for you. So, and Shane's also wondering if other people have used that. All right. And we have Avri checking in from Israel. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. All right, so we have from David Evans, guys, does anyone know where I can download Cubase SX3 to convert old projects to using Cubase Pro 11? And will it work with my USB license? And will Cubase SX3 work on Windows 10? So, you know, if you just do, you could download it from the Steinberg website. You know, we'll just Google this quickly. So if you just kind of come right here, so I just Googled Cubase SX3 to convert files. You'll go to the Help Center. And once you're here, let's see if the link is in here. So if you just go here to this page, I think you could, here's the update. Let me just see. But if you Google it, you could actually, you know, just find the download pretty easily. And then, you know, it'll work with your Cubase 11 license, and so it should be pretty straightforward. All right, so we have Vagabond from Iran. Thanks for being here. All right, so we have a question. Hi, is there a way to modify transients in a loop without the envelope shaper? The envelope shaper is probably the fastest, easiest way to do it, you know, but sometimes you could do it with a compressor if you wanted to. So let's say if I just jump to, you know, let's say if I'm looking at my sample editor here, and we'll go, so we'll look at our, so if we look at the amplitude on, you know, like this particular waveform, if I wanted to modify, again, I could just come here to process, and I can say, okay, let's just add a plugin, and we could go to compressor. I want to just totally kind of squash the dynamics. So in essence, that could, you know, change the envelope of the file just by doing like that. But, you know, probably the fastest way is to, you know, you could, you know, choose if you wanted to come in here. If you go near like the sample level, you could draw, you know, physically draw in, but, you know, probably the fastest way to get to that is to actually just do the envelope shaper, but you could manually do it. But I think the envelope shaper is going to be kind of a much faster method for accomplishing that. All right, great to see Dan Freeman in the live stream. All right, we have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. All right, so we had a question. What's the difference between VST-I and rack instruments? What are the different uses for them? Thanks. So they're pretty similar now. It used to be that we would kind of follow like an instrument rack here. So like when Cubase first started, we kind of had the paradigm of almost a virtual rack of like, let's say like, your 1080 and different synthesizers, and you could load them in the rack and send a MIDI track to those particular instruments. And that would give you not only like a MIDI track that could be sent to the instrument, that same MIDI track you could then switch to like an external or like a legacy instrument. And then, people, could sometimes get confused on, okay, I create a MIDI track and then, what destination is it going to? So to simplify this process, we added the capability of what's called an instrument track. So when we add an instrument track, what this will do is it was originally intended to be kind of a simpler, more streamlined process so that when we add an instrument track, this could automatically add the instrument and create the track for us. And this would be a monotimbral. So we could have one MIDI channel and we could have one stereo output. And it was just intended to like, I just want to start playing right now. And an instrument track would also consolidate when we come over here and just consolidate. So we don't have MIDI volume, like a MIDI CC fader, but we have a volume fader that's tied because we know that an instrument track is going to a software controlled instrument. So predominantly a software instrument. So over time, so it used to be that instrument tracks were, like quick, easy, simple for a lot of users. And people that were working with multi-timbral instruments, let's say they had 16 different patches loaded in Hallion Sonic SE, where each of these patches was going to a separate, unique, distinct output in the mixer, that at that point we could say that's when people would use MIDI tracks being routed to multiple MIDI tracks being routed to a single instrument rack. Now, some of these limitations over time have changed. So, so it used to be that the instrument tracks were only a stereo output. That's been changed. And, and so that was one of the big differentiations. So most people have kind of migrated the when using VST instrument racks, that when they use kind of like instrument racks, most people will now use instrument tracks because it kind of consolidates things and you're not as limited to, okay, I'm starting a drum thing as an instrument track, and now I need to take my kick, snare, hi-hat to different outputs, then kind of having to load up an instrument rack. So that's not the case anymore. So most people have kind of migrated to VST instrument tracks, but there's still people that are kind of very set in their workflows. And if you're using something like Vienna Pro, like a VE Pro, they often work better as instrument racks, so that you could send that over to VE Pro. So, nowadays, most people running locally hosted VST instruments will do instrument tracks and instrument racks, often for instruments that are hosted on VE Pro. So, but it's a little confusing, but we can't necessarily shut off kind of like, years of workflow and kind of, concepts for people as we make the migration. So you have the choice between the two. All right, so we just see from Taylor Sapp, how would I connect a keyboard expression pedal to a wah-wah? All right, so let's say if I'm here, so I will add an audio track. All right, and let's say on this audio track, I have as an insert, let's say the VST amp rack. And let's come over here and say, okay, like our post effects, I want this to be a wah-wah. So I don't have an expression pedal hooked up to my current controller, but I think what you do is, one is you could just come over here and a lot of times, let's see if this works. So once my wah-wah has been introduced, you could add a MIDI track. Okay, this MIDI track, we can now set it to the VST amp rack MIDI in. So let's say on this MIDI track here, I want to control this. So I think I could mimic this without a expression pedal. So I'll come over here to MIDI control. And let's set up CC11. So I think that you could just kind of have that automatically work. One of the things that you could also do is you could go to Quick Controls, click on Learn, move the parameter, and assign your Quick Control setting to that. So if you click on the Learn, move the wah-wah, and then within your Quick Controls under Studio Setup, you could just say, okay, when I come to my Quick Controls, we could just say, okay, this would be CC11. You could just click on Learn and move the knob, and then that will control the wah-wah from your expression pedal for your guitar part. So I notice on top of the arrange page, it says version 8.0. Is there a special reason to working in that version? So I'm working everything in version 11.04.11.041, but the project itself may have been originally created in Cubase 8, which is why you may see that indicated on the project. So, but the version that I am running is the 11.041. So it's just what I haven't saved that project in this particular version. So it just kind of indicates that to you. All right, so Gareth is telling people to scoop the like button. So. All right, so we see from Sven Isaacson, forgive a dummy question. What's a Discord? Sounds like people who don't get along. How do we access it? So I think the Jazz Dude will, so Discord is kind of like a more contemporary kind of information forum. So with links and ways of organizing it. So I'm sure that if you go to the Jazz Dude will probably post the link, but if you just go if you just download Discord, or I think you go to discord.com, just look for Cubase Nation. So it's just a way of kind of collecting information that's easily accessible and organized. All right, so I just see the loops are WAV files. Is it possible to find the files on my PC in a folder? So let's come over here. Let's say we go to our loop files here. All right, so let's say if we go to the main media bay. So let's say if we come over here to factory content, let's go to VST sound. So let's say, okay, we're in Bloom. So we'll come here, we have audio files. All right. So I think pretty much once you're in, so let's say I have these loops that you could right click. All right, so and if you just want to go over here, that you could see, I think we could see the location of the particular file. So, but sometimes so no, a lot of times that you could right click some of the factory content. You may not be able to. It may be kind of compiled together, but for most content, you know, if you could just come over to, so let's say, if I come here to this computer, let's say if you go to documents, that now you could reveal in Finder, and that will take you there. Let's go ahead and try it again here. So some of it may be kind of copy protected, but other ones you could just kind of right click and reveal in Finder. Okay, so I just see a question. What would be the best ASIO guard level settings for an iMac Pro 10 core with Cubase 11 Pro? Also disk preload setting, can you elaborate? All right, so when we go to look at these particular functions, we can see these in the audio system. So generally, you know, I leave it to the defaults. You know, so I have the activate ASIO guard, and what that's going to allow you to do is to like the track that you are currently have in record enable or monitor enable will you know, will basically run at a lower latency than the other tracks. So, you know, instead of running the entire project at like, let's say, you know, 128 buffer, only the tracks that you have recorded enabled will run at 128 and the other tracks will run at 512. So it kind of allows you to do that. So if you had a really extreme, and you could kind of see the indication here. So this is kind of the recommended setting. If you have kind of extreme an extreme project that's like huge and you need to do like a lot of performance, you know, when you're kind of maxing out the CPU, you could go to high. And what the disk preload would allow you to do is just to kind of set how much of, you know, the audio is going to be preloaded into RAM. So it plays so that when you come over here and kind of hit play, that it's instantaneous for you. So usually leaving those at the default is good, and that's what I have set on my system. All right, so Michael Teams wants people to spank the like button. Okay, so we see, hello, Cubase 11. This question, Cubase 11 does not open the entire project with all the plugins that I have arranged in Nuendo 10. What could be wrong? So it just was, if you could, so generally if the plugins are available between both programs, I've never had an issue of that. I've had issues where perhaps the plugin was a Nuendo specific plugin like Post Filter or some other plugins that aren't available in Cubase. So that could be the case. So if you could let us know if it's a common plugin between the two, or maybe it's a plugin that's kind of unique to Nuendo that isn't available to use as Cubase. Okay, so we see a question from Dan Freeman. With VST amp racks supposed to be used as a stereo effects on the stereo track, so does it hurt to use them as mono in mono tracks? So, if you're running it as an insert, so, what people will do often is just kind of come over here and, if you have your track and if your track is mono, you go to a mono and you go to your inserts, that the inserts here will be mono. And if it's stereo, at that point, you could have the plugin will be in stereo. So what I've seen some people do is run like the amps directly here in, as an insert. And then as a send, if you wanted to have like stereo delays from the effects rack, come over here, let's add an effects to send one, and we'll come over here to the distortion and we'll say, okay, we go to the VST amp rack. So we add this new amp rack as a send, and we will choose no amplifier, no cabinet, and then we could just have all of our effects be stereo when working on a mono guitar part. So you could kind of decouple the plugin and have part of the effects parts be in stereo and others, and the amp itself be in mono as an insert. So some people will decouple it. So, most guitar amps that people use aren't in stereo. So there's, different schools of thought on that as well. All right, so we have the Cube joining from Melbourne, Florida. Thanks for being here. All right, and we have Steven from Indiana. Okay, so you see, this is from Joe K's earlier question. I understand importing all the audio, but how do you pull in tempo from the other sessions and get them to line up with the audio of this specific audio without impacting the other tracks? All right, so let's say if I have, I'll do a new project here. All right, so I think I'll have tempos on these, but I'll come here, say, okay, I want to import tracks from project. So I could come right over here and say, okay, I want to do this particular project. So we'll say, all right, and as I do this, we could import, so let's say, if we import here, okay, let's see if I mess that up. But one thing, let me see if this is just, go to this particular project and make sure it has a tempo map turned on. Okay, so I'll just activate the tempo here. Okay, so, but one of the things that you could do on each of the tracks is just simply export the tempo track. So let's say, you know, for each of them as you do it, you know, we could export, and let me just find one. All right, so I think we may, if I open up another project here, so let's say I have that as 100 beats per minute and I want to go to a different project. So let me just see if I have one. I'm thinking, okay, so let's say we have this broken down now. Okay, so I could, you know, one of the things is just come right over here. I'll just say, let's export the tempo track. I'll call this bicycle. So now when I go to, you know, I could come over here. So let's close this. I'll go back to this project. So say we have our tempo map of 100 beats per minute. All right, so I want to move, let's say I want song 2 to be here. So I could come over here and let's import tracks from project. Okay, and at this point I could say we're going to select all, and I will put these to, and to our destination we're going to import at the cursor position. So we now have this, and at that point I want to import my tempo track. Okay, I thought I stored it in here. Let me go back to project and I'll just export it one more time and remember the location. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we'll come right over here and import the tempo track. And then when we come over here to so then you could just see the tempo track just automatically. So, you know, you could import and export tempo tracks or import and export them as standard MIDI files as well. But so that's how you could do it. So the tempo tracks can be imported and exported so you can stack multiple ones together. Okay, so we just see I'm working with musicians virtually. How can I share my screen, host a video call, and they can hear my Cubase in high quality? Can anyone YouTube live stream Discord? So yeah, anyone, as long as you have a Google, uh, I think as long as you have a Google account that you could just do, live streaming. You could also just set up like a free Zoom account. I think Zoom, you could do it for 40 minutes. So it's really open to anyone. So so you may, but there may have been like with the YouTube, like you may have to have 1,000 or 10,000 subscribers to your particular channel to live stream. But there's another, so it's pretty easy, just what I'm doing. Or just using OBS, but using Zoom, you could definitely do this. And and how I kind of have my audio set up is just my Cubase is going out to an audio interface. That audio interface is being used solely for Cubase, and I have a Yamaha. Excuse me. Using an MG10XU mixer that my microphone and the output of the audio interface from Cubase is going to. And I use that, and then you could do it in Zoom and share screens pretty easily. So for the streaming part, I use just a separate USB mixer, and I find that then changing sample rates isn't a potential nightmare if you have to do that. And if you needed to just stream the audio to someone else, if you didn't need to share your screen, you could do the VST Connect, and that way the other person could download VST Connect Performer, and they could just monitor the signal. So that's another way. But if you need to have them see your Cubase screen, just set it up for through Zoom and just share your screen. All right, so we see one more question, what ARA is. So ARA is kind of a communication protocol between different host applications like Cubase and different specific audio editing environments. So something where it's a little more involved than just a plugin where you're sending information back and forth from the host program into the audio editor and back from the audio editor back. So it's just a communication protocol. So it's often used for like Spectral Layers, Melodyne. I think if you're doing like Vocal Align, I believe that utilizes ARA as well. All right, so we just see a question, because I don't often join here. Is there any VST sequencer in Cubase 9? So, obviously Cubase is, probably the most robust sequencer that's available on the market. So, once you, want to get into all of your MIDI sequencing, it's very easy to do. So, you create an instrument or, that's routed to VST plugins, which Steinberg of course invented, or if you wanted to route it to external MIDI equipment, you could do that. But this will all be all your MIDI data. So if you wanted to see it, or notation, or list editor, drum editor, or the most popular key editor. So yeah, I mean, so you could definitely. So I'm not sure if you mean something different by VST sequencer, but those are all VST instruments that are just being sequenced directly inside of Cubase. All right, so I see Michael Teams has granted me 4 scoops of black diamond ice cream. Yum. All right, so Thank you. That's very generous. All right, so I just see a question from Lionel Thomas. Any plans for Steinberg on integrating Backbone to Groove Agent in the future? Seems like a logical move since one can complete the other. So there's a lot of people that will use Groove Agent, specifically for just, just doing acoustic drums and like percussion agent. If you have the full version of Groove Agent. So I haven't heard of any plans for that. I mean, you'll have some of the capabilities. I think Backbone is kind of a unique solution for doing not only just drum synthesis and programming and sound design, but also just, for sound effects and sound design. So they could be, while there is some overlap there, they are kind of two different schools of thought. Like a lot of people wouldn't use Backbone if you're trying to have like, a virtual drum part like that sounds like a real drummer did it. So there's lots of people just use that, and some people that, will only do the electronic side. So I think, I haven't heard of any plans. It doesn't mean that it's not happening. But, both Groove Agent, the full version, and Backbone are both available inside the Absolute 5 collection. So if you get Absolute 5, you could have both of them right there. All right, so we have Steve Leeds checking in from San Francisco. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we see from Michael Pierce, just says, I kind of want to know what Sidechain Destroyer is. Okay, so, the Destroyer plugins, go take a look at it here. Actually, let me just go to another project here. I'll show it. All right, so what Destroyer is kind of it's probably where Michael Teams had saw it. So this is a demo that shows kind of both the sidechain functionality as well as the Destroyer plugin. So if you haven't seen what Destroyer is all right, so let's say I just want to take this kick and let me just go ahead here and let me just resize this here just a little bit. Okay, so what the Destroyer is kind of a distortion plugin that's often used on kick drums, especially for like EDM. So let's say I want to take this. So we go to the inserts here. We could have the Destroyer plugin. So if I wanted to just kind of, give that kick that extra push, it's kind of an electronic distortion really designed for electronic EDM music. You could obviously use it for other sources, but it would say if I want to come to this synth here and I'll just set up just a quick side chain and we'll set it up with our kick. So let's say I have that going on. So let's say if I just have that going on in my kick, and a lot of times people want to really make the kick just stand out in the mix. So just coming over here and putting the Destroyer plugin. So it's a very commonly used production trick for EDM music. But again, just because that's, where a lot of people use it, don't limit it to that, kind of like the squasher plugin. But the name came from just showing two features and one little demo project. All right, reading through more comments. All right, so we see Brianna from Youngstown. Great to have you back on the live stream. Thanks for joining. So I just see, hi Greg, how does Cubase fare in comparison with new Logic Pro 7? Can we expect something like Dolby Audio Bridge in Cubase soon? So we already kind of have been doing that for a long time in our Nuendo program. So, just kind of reading different forums, it seems like a lot of people may have been a little underwhelmed with, the capabilities of busing and not having multi-channel buses. So, but we already kind of do the Dolby audio with the rendering inside our Nuendo program. We're the first DAW to integrate that at no extra charge. So, but I haven't really checked out the other new features in it. So I may not be the best person to comment on it. Okay, so we just see I have a verb and delay effects that has multiple audio track sends to them, drums to the verb and also to the vox. When I solo the drums, I still hear the vocals in the effects. How can I solo drums alone? So let's see if we could set up something similar. So let's say I'll have guitars and drums. Okay, so let's say I will have all of my drums. And I'll create an effects channel. We'll make it an obnoxiously large reverb. Okay, so now we'll have our drums. And let's say I want to take my guitars and send the guitars to the same. Okay, so let's say if we come here. All right, so let's say if we solo. All right, so I'll just kind of solo my, let's say my kick drum here. So when I solo the source here, it is soloing that, so which makes sense. So say I go to my guitar. So even though these are both going to this same reverb here, so let's say I just come here, the guitar is not bleeding through. So I don't hear the drums bleeding through. And let's see if there's a preference that might affect that. So you could check this particular preference here where mute presend when mute and see if that is checked. Let's see if I uncheck that, if that changes the behavior of this. Doesn't seem to affect. So you see that that guitar is feeding the reverb. And now when I come over here, I just don't hear the other tracks there. Let me just see if there's another preference that might cause that to behave differently. So let me know if that's behaving differently on your system, but that seems to only solo the particular sources and not the others. Okay, so you just see, is there an option to have the loop MIDI region follow the BPM? I'd like 4 bars to play 4 bars regardless of BPM. Okay, so let's come here. Jump to another project where we could show this. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. I see that I'm at about 34 minutes behind the live questions. I'll try to catch up throughout the live stream here. So generally the MIDI will automatically follow by default. So let's say if I want to come here and let's say I go to my patterns. And I drag this over. All right, so I'll just kind of start this and let's say, so this is just MIDI data. Okay, so let's say now, I'll just type in, let's say tempo. All right, so I'll have that loop. So let's say, okay, I want the tempo to be, 96 beats a minute. So, and the time that it wouldn't do this is if this track was set to linear mode. So if I switch this, let's say I have my click track on and now I go to 132. But once this track goes back into musical mode, at that point, whenever I type in my value, it will just kind of automatically follow. So make sure that you have this set to musical mode, where you see like a little music note, and then it should automatically follow the tempo for you. All right, we see Sable Winters is on the live stream. Thanks for joining. All right, and Nick is able to join us. I see Tim Weinheimer saying Greg is like Felix the Cat for his magic bag of Cubase tricks. So I just get all sorts of bizarre questions from people all over the world doing interesting workflows. All right, we see Michael Pierce is probably dropping off for a little bit to do some, I think he usually does tutoring on Friday night. So. Okay, still reading through different comments here. All right, we see that Pablo has made the live stream as well. Sorry if I missed him earlier. All right, so we have the whole Hot Mess ensemble here. All right. See, Gareth is very excited to have his fellow Spaniard on the live stream. All right. All right, so just see Dan Freeman's just mentioning it. It's like when I first got Cubase and my friend and I couldn't get it to work, and we learned you couldn't record live via internet, and you had to pay for the service, so ignored it. So with with VST Connect, you do get 2 channels free. You don't have to pay for it, and you can record live. So it's not where 2 people can record against each other. So there's that stupid physics thing that won't allow data to do, but so it's not that you record in real time. 2 people record real time with each other, but you can send files to the person who can record and monitor and record and send that back directly into your computer, all with the latency compensation. But okay, so we see question. Hi, Greg. My CPU and audio processing is crashing with hardly anything going. I optimized and tried just about everything with no change. Also, when I change buffer size, the CPU level stays the same. So if you, I'm not sure if you're running Mac or PC, but if you're running PC, check out the the DPC latency monitor, and maybe it's something that's causing, often when I hear stuff like this, it's kind of related to like an NVIDIA graphic driver. You know, but I'm not sure what particular system that you're running, but you could maybe check out the, you know, on the Windows, there's a utility called DPC latency mon. I believe that's the name of it, and that could actually kind of pinpoint, you know, components in your computer that could be causing interrupts or issues with your particular, you know, with your particular system. So, all right, we see Gareth had to get back to work, I think. All right, so we see Jazz Dude just mentioning, you know, the future computer audio transfer is LAN. Check out Dante. Maybe Greg give a 2-minute introduction to the AIC 128. So what Dante is a way to, you know, instead of using traditional, you know, like, you know, it kind of started off as like, you know, instead of carrying heavy snakes of, you know, like for live sound, where we could have, you know, basically like 128 channels, you know, wrapped around 128 individual cables that we could transmit that audio data digitally over a standard Ethernet connection. And that's what Dante is. So Dante is very used widely for live sound and especially for facilities, you know, where we have to move audio to multiple rooms, or capturing audio from like a stage that's going to a different building. You know, Dante is a way of transmitting audio over a standard Ethernet connection. So there's a lot of advantages to that type of system, you know, for facilities. But you know, it's a common way to kind of move audio from, you know, we see it a lot in university settings, going from building A to building B. You know, I'm recording here, but I want to, you know, the stage is in this building, but the studio's in a different building. So lots of universities that have, or facilities that need to move audio between, you could actually just kind of run this all over a Dante network. It hasn't quite penetrated so much into like recording studios that are not necessarily networked all together, but a lot of post-production facilities and, you know, event venues are using Dante. And to do this, you could also get a Dante card. And we see most of the Yamaha digital consoles like the Rivage, you know, the PM10, PM7, that those will be using Dante to transmit the audio from the converter to the console for DSP processing. So, and then if you wanted to capture that, there's an AIC 128 card, and that will allow you to have 128 channels of audio. Now, one of the great things with Dante is you could take different, you know, converters if they have a Dante out, and you could mix and match converters and up to, you know, 128 channels, and just say, you know, I want 8 channels of Yamaha conversion. I want 8 channels, 16 channels of Focusrite. I want this as mic pre's, and you can mix and match all within the Dante framework. So it still hasn't quite resonated so much with studios. You know, in the future it will be, and we see it as a lot of studios are being built and being designed that they're kind of thinking of going to like a Dante based environment, because, you know, it's a lot of flexibility of being able to, you know, record, you know, let's say if you have 3 studio rooms, that you could take the IO from each of those rooms and run them all into any of the other rooms together. So that's something. So Dante is a very interesting thing. I think we'll see it, you know, spread more and more. It's kind of taken over the whole live sound you know, world. So, and, you know, instead of having heavy snakes, you have one Ethernet cable. All right, reading through comments. All right, so we see Graham Witcher's been able to join the live stream from the UK, from Royal Bhutan Wasset, or Royal Bhutan Basset, I believe. Sorry if I got that backwards. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there any way to check if our software is updated in the download assistant? If we have the latest versions of our software, Cubase and Absolute, it's a bit confusing for me. So it doesn't necessarily automatically link. So let's say if I go, just kind of be aware of what you downloaded. But like, let's say I just downloaded some updates today for my new OS version. So a lot of times when we do this, let's say if I go to VST Instruments and plugins, like I think I got Backbone today. So a lot of these you could see that this has been, downloaded and it's been indicated here, but it doesn't notify you automatically in here if there's a new version. So you may just have to kind of manually check the versions. I think that, this type of thing may be coming within the new license management system to kind of make that whole process a little seamless, but you may have to kind of manually check and see if you've actually downloaded it in the, you could see if it has been, if that particular file has been downloaded from the download assistant. So we see Pablo is just questioning Greg has updated his Mac. So yeah, we had to, our IT departments have made us all go to the latest Mac OS, which has been okay so far for me. So in lieu of expecting a lot of problems with the new release coming next week. So that way we're not kind of totally stuck on a new operating system that's just brand new. Okay, so we see Pablo saying it looks a little different. So yeah, there's some visual appearances, but everything seems to be working fine. Okay, so we have a question, I believe from Alexander from Russia. I was add FX to my channel as a send effects. Any fast way to go from my channel to this effects? Sometimes I scroll down, open up FX E button, but it's annoying. So let's say I have this particular channel, and I'll add a couple of effects sends here based on that. Okay, so now as I want to do this, so, when you actually look here at the top, you could actually say, okay, this is the channel, and then you could say 4 targets. So you could say, okay, let's go now to, so we could actually just say, click right here and say, oh, I want to go to the Revelation channel, and then you're in the Revelation effects return. And then if you wanted to just kind of go back to where you were. So, once you're here, just look at the top. And let's say I want to go to the mod machine channel. I could click right here. And these are all the destinations. I could say, let's go to the mod machine. And then it'll take you directly to that channel. And then you could just double click to open up the insert. So that's a pretty fast way to be able to kind of navigate through kind of the signal flow. So you could just say, okay, this is going to the stereo delay. I'm right there. One mouse click, we're back to the particular channel that's feeding that target. So that may be able to speed up your navigation process. All right, so we see Gant Kushner. Great to see you on the live stream in the midst of a mix session. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, in the midst of a mix session, but a question. In version 10.5, I get a volume fader in the export window while doing a real-time export. In 11, I do not. How can I get the fader back in 11? So that was a feature that was, I'm not sure what the reasoning was, but that is not in version 11. So we go to our export audio mixdown and we choose to do a real-time mixdown. You know, what we could get is, there used to be just a little fader here, but all that fader was doing was just the control room volume. And I realized that it could be annoying that once you're doing your real-time mixdown that you can't grab the control room volume to adjust. So just be aware that, you know, you may want to adjust the control room volume before doing the real-time export. So I brought this to their attention a couple times. I think it's still, even in the documentation, is kind of showing it, but it was just kind of an oversight. So, but I'll make sure to bring that to their attention one more time. So good to see you on the live stream, Gant. He's a wonderful guitarist and engineer, has a great studio, I think, in Silver Spring, Maryland. I know it's in Maryland area. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to split notes in a MIDI chord to different instruments, like route lowest to bass, next to cello, then viola, then violin? Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we could show this. Okay, so let's say we have this, and I want to take, let's say, just a quick electric piano part. All right, so let's say we have, okay, so kind of an easy way of doing this is actually using the score editor. So let's say we go to our score editor here, and let's say I'll just split. So I think if we go to the score editor here and go to functions, and you don't have, if you don't read music, you could still do this, and say explode, and we can say to new tracks, and we'll say number of new tracks. So it would probably be one less than the number of voices. And at that point, we'll just say okay. And as we look at this now, we could have like these voices kind of split for you automatically. So give that a try. You could also go into like the, you could manually kind of do through like a logical editor if you want to. So you can say, you know, find the lowest voice. So let's say if we come over here to our MIDI logical editor, and we could say extract, type is equal to note, and we'll say the context variable is equal to lowest pitch. Or I think we could even say position in chord, and then we could say root note. And then you could extract the root notes from chords. So, and you could do that, you know, multiple times as well. But check out the, you know, the score explode function under functions. All right. So we see question, Greg. Could you please throw some light on ambisonics? Logic 10.7 has introduced Dolby Atmos. Is it equivalent? Thank you, Greg. So, Dolby Atmos is a specific, is more of a specific platform, which we see kind of incorporated in Nuendo. And what ambisonics allows you to do is binaural audio is kind of the intention of it. So once we come over here, let me just go to my projects. So, with ambisonics, it's kind of more of an open sourced system where, Dolby is going to be, designed to be using for theaters, and there's kind of a hope and desire that everyone will repurchase all of the music that they bought one more time, but in kind of a binaural format, so that you could have 360-degree audio as you kind of spin your head and move your listening position. So, ambisonics is more kind of, we could think of it as almost more of an open source audio format, whereas Dolby Atmos could be very stringent on requirements, but not, and one of the concepts is that we could take our audio here in, let's say, okay, I want to define when we go to add an audio track, we could add audio tracks in different formats, including for our configuration. So we could have it set for first, second, and third order ambisonics. So as we work with this, if we wanted to have, audio that was kind of spatialized, and if you're wearing headphones, this may be like a bit more effective. That, if I wanted to have like maybe a bird that's flying over, that we could choose to have that bird kind of fly what's perceived as behind your head. So we could have kind of the top view here. And then as we monitor this, we could do it through a VST ambi decoder. So, but a lot of times you may have to, especially when you start getting into effects where you have all of your effects need to be in multi-channel effects buses. That's where it gets a little tricky, and many solutions may not provide a solution for that. So I think, by far probably the most robust Atmos integration is currently going to be in Nuendo. So, we have that already going. And if you wanted to monitor, because most people don't have, and it used to be like for Dolby Atmos that you would have to be certified by Dolby in your monitoring environment. I had a friend that had to jump through like a zillion hoops just to make sure that, because he was working in a dedicated room he built in the back of his house. He was the first one to get Dolby certified to actually do that. So it's very confusing to a lot of people. But, and the premise of Dolby Atmos is to have height channels so that, you have not only your traditional surround, but also channels for height. And that if you're in a movie theater, if you are working in like a 7-1-2, which is how most people, monitoring environment, and you do a height element, that if you're doing this in other facilities that have more height speakers, that it automatically carries over. So there's still, there's still lots of workflow things that are still being figured out, and many engineers that are kind of going crazy feeling that, because they're being asked to deliver Atmos mixes without any real listeners using it or playing it back in Atmos, and now they're starting to not get paid to do an Atmos mix. So it is confusing. So All right, reading through comments. Okay, finding my spot in the chat field. All right, so we just see, hi everyone, is there any topic today? So basically what we do in the live streams is just, we have enough questions that people just kind of ask any questions that you have on Steinberg products, and we'll go through and answer them for you. All right, we have Matt Elder checking in from Canada. Thanks for joining. And we see Michael Teams is indicating that Pablo is still famous, so that's good. And JVI is on the live stream. All right. All right, so we see Ralph is asking, I'm looking for a MIDI controller keyboard. Is there any better one than NI Complete for Cubase? So, you know, I've kind of, you know, there's a lot of great MIDI controllers out there. It seems like I've had, you know, from discussions on these live streams, some people have kind of fallen out of favor with the NI Complete. But, you know, there's a lot of great controllers. I think Arturia makes some great controllers, but, you know, and Akai, I think, makes some really wonderful controllers as well. But, you know, there's a lot of great options that are currently available, so you could check out some of those. But maybe other people could chime in what controller keyboards I have also. Like the Nectar Panorama, which has, you know, pretty amazing integration as well, especially for plugins. All right, so we see a question. Can you tell how Cubase and Nuendo work together? So Cubase and Nuendo are separate programs. Nuendo will have like 99.9% of all the features of Cubase plus additional tools, like for working with game audio, for doing Dolby Atmos, for doing ADR work, for reconforming. So, you know, we could think of, you know, Nuendo as Cubase plus more for kind of advanced audio production needs. And game audio connect. So you know, they don't necessarily work together. If I opened up Nuendo, you'd say, oh, it looks kind of similar to Cubase until you get into those particular areas of work. And that's when Nuendo can make a difference, when, you know, it's the type of tools that often companies need to actually hire a software development firm to do custom, that Nuendo can just kind of do out of the box. So a lot of people that are doing music production may not benefit from that, but if you're doing a lot of, you know, advanced audio stuff, then, you know, those tools can save you, you know, tremendous amounts of time. All right, so we see question, is VST Connect possible if my musician doesn't have an Ethernet connection? So it's possible, it's just not ideal or recommended because the latencies and the timing can fluctuate quite a bit, you know, and a lot of people I find that, you know, they say they don't have an Ethernet connection, that if you bought them you know, a 50-foot or 100-foot Ethernet cable, that, you know, it's like, oh, you know, whatever, it's, you know, $25 on Amazon or whatever, that, you know, and hook it up into their router, you know, that if they do a hardwire connection, you'll get better performance. But I've seen people do it on Wi-Fi, And as long as, but with Wi-Fi, you always have like, oh, someone else in the house was watching Netflix and the Wi-Fi signal, the bandwidth dropped down. So having kind of a steady uh, stream that's not fluctuating, so depending on the situation, they could still, Ethernet isn't required, but it helps a lot. All right, so I just see, hi, also when I click on my freeze function button, nothing happens. Thanks for all your time and help. So you may not notice the freeze happening. So what the freeze button will do is if we have a particular project here, so let's say I have this loop, and on this particular loop, I have a number of effects, or I have this electric piano part, and this instrument's taking a lot of CPU power. So I click on the freeze button, we'll see this freeze instrument option. So I could freeze the instrument and the channels. We could add a tail size. So when I come there, then, it kind of looks the same. We notice that we can't really edit it, but what it is it's rendered an audio file in the background for us. So, and it goes into like an edits folder. So at this point, I go to move this, I can't really do editing on this because I've frozen that particular track. So it's not taking real-time CPU cycles to do. It's just playing back as an audio file. Then I could choose to unfreeze, and now I could edit and move freely as I want. So I could freeze not only tracks, so if I have this with like a 16 convolution reverbs on it, and it's those 16 convolution reverbs are killing my computer, I could just freeze that particular track, and that will render it as an audio file, and then those reverbs are freed up from utilizing CPU resources, and it'll just play back as an audio file. We could always choose to unfreeze, and we could also do this with instruments itself. So we could take all of the audio files that are all the tracks are going to a particular instrument, and freeze the instrument. So if there's no data, so let's say if I come here to this and I don't have any data and I freeze, it may not do anything because there's nothing to actually render to freeze. So maybe it's set up kind of in that situation as well. All right, we see Angelina is also says, yes, I run Windows 10 and NVIDIA. I'll try your suggestion. So, I think a lot of people just don't install like the gaming components. So, and just kind of like just the core display driver functionality. All right, so we see, all right, so let's see, question is from Kush Diara. Issues panning group tracks sent to an effect. Pan option is not available. Not trying to pan effect, but the track itself with the effect on. All right, so let's say, I'll jump back to another project here. All right, so I will revert this. Okay, I'll just send all of my drums here to a group channel. Okay, so say Okay, so let me, so I have issues with panning, grouped tracks sent to an effect. Pan option is not available. Okay, so I'm not sure if it's channels here that are grouped. So let me just see if this is, so I will link like these two channels. Okay, so now when I move one, they'll both be moved. So let me just make sure, see. Okay, so panning group tracks to sent to an effect. Pan option is not available. All right, so, and I'm gonna send all of these tracks to a reverb as well. So just to make sure we have this set up as described. Okay, so so issues panning group tracks sent to an effect. Pan option is not available. Not trying to pan the effect, but the track itself with the effect on. All right, so let's say I'll take the, so let's say I'll just take the snare here. And I'll just loop a quick section. All right, so now, all right, so, you know, because it is going to the effect, you know, we could pan. So, you know, what you're just hearing is the effect send. So let's say if I cut the ascend here. So say we'll make our snare. But now that the snare is going into the, you can hear the source being panned. So the source is being panned, but you hear the reverb in both destinations because the, so, you know, the source is being panned, but the reverb is staying the same. And I think that you might be able to have just a preference. Let's see. So if I go to, but I think there's a preference where you could have the sends automatically follow the panner. Let's see if we can find that real quick. So, but, you know, if, so, you know, the track is panning, but the reverb, you know, may not pan. I'm just trying to remember. Where that function was, but you could have it so that the panning. So if I come here, so let's say if I, so, and also make sure that when you add your effects end, that the effects end itself is in stereo. So when you say, okay, let's add our effects channel, that is set in stereo as well. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Yeah, so I just see from Dan Freeman is like, I thought VST Connect would have had a click track, then buffered the audio video where two people could play together with no more than a phone call latency. So when you actually, if you know, it's always interesting, you know, like even like phone calls have tremendous amount of latency. If you actually talk in, let's say you call someone in the same room on cell phones, and you can see how much latency is actually just kind of in a normal phone call latency. So I think there's a company Jamlink that was trying to do it, and you know, it's only like works within like a couple 100 miles, just because getting that amount of data across, you know, hundreds of miles is still really tricky. Yeah. And a lot of it's just like getting into your internet service provider. That's kind of the huge bottleneck. Okay, so just see, okay, so I see from JVI, saying a question about a UR44. So let's say I can only just comment on UR44. I can only imagine UR44 is way better than a USB tape deck at converting the analog signal into digital, but perhaps I'm wrong. So I think anything that's like probably a USB tape deck would, you know, probably not be, you know, the ideal professional solution. So I doubt that they're going to have the same level of converters. So I think you're much better off with your UR44. All right, you see Michael Teams continues to deliver on the ice cream. All right, so we see JVI is wanting to know if Sable has recorded Beatles and Stones. And Sable, if you want my project file of that, I'd be happy to share it with you. So let me know. You can modify it. All right, so we see from Toothless Bulldog 2.0, the stream is fantastic. We should all give it a thumbs up. So I'd appreciate it. It makes it easier for me to continue to do these things. All right. Okay, so you just see from question from Richard here. Any way to increase automation resolution? I mean, it is really small, and distance between the points is so small. So, you know, so let's say if we have automation going on, let me just. You know, so let's say, okay, I'm just here, so. You know, so, you know, if you want to, you know, increase, you know, or decrease the automation, you know, but if we have the automation selected, you know, here, you know, you could just type in values, you know, so we could just come right here. You could say, okay, I wanted to go 384 to, you know, 4.2 to, you know, 4.19. So you could go in 100th of a dB, but you know, it's pretty easy just to get the exact values. And more people want generally aim for more precise automation control as opposed to more kind of macro. But you know, if you wanted to, you could, you know, also get into like the project logical editor. And as you get into the project logical editor, you could also kind of say, okay, media type is equal to automation, and I want to trim, and you can say, you know, multiply by 1.1. And now I could just take the automation and go up by 10% or divide by 0.9. So there's other ways of being able to kind of treat treat automation data. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see the legendary Roger Hooper has joined the live stream. Great to see you on the live stream, Roger. I hope you and your family are well. Roger is a wonderful composer and an amazing keyboardist. And check out his work at Roger Hooper Music. And he ran the keyboard department at Washington Music, one of the first stores when I was starting off. Roger knew me when I was first starting off, like over 29 years ago. So thanks for being a part of the live stream and helping me in my career so much, Roger. Okay, so we just see question from Dan Freeman. My Focal Focus 65 monitors frequency range is 40 hertz to 35K, but our hearing goes to 20 to 25K. Do I need to sub to properly mix 40 hertz, 20, 25 hertz? So, generally you're going to hear always any of those frequencies. You're going to hear actually, you're going to hear kind of the harmonic overtone series. So, there's been a zillion hit records done with Yamaha NS10s, which have horrible frequency response. And, but people, it's whatever you kind of learn to mix on. So if those frequencies aren't there, I don't think you need a sub to do that. And often subs could introduce like more phase relationships in the critical low end than having monitors that you just kind of know how not to push or how to work with. So listen to reference material, get used to how your speakers sound, and you'll be fine. You're probably not having a lot of frequencies below 40 hertz in your project. Okay, reading through comments. Seeing some more discussion on headphones. Okay, so you see from Marcos Gomez, hi Greg, everyone facing issues here, Windows 11 with UR22. The sound is clipping, popping, crackling, and I can't change to 48K or above. No control panel to do this, nothing. So, once you're in, so as soon as you come right over here, so, just to do it, the UR22 will just kind of follow whatever sample rate that you're actually at. So I'm not sure if you're in Cubase, but you could kind of see the sample rate there. But in Cubase, you could set the sample rate by going into the project setup. So you could see, okay, I could switch my UR24C here, which is a very similar interface, to 192K, and that would just switch the sample rate. So it's really kind of whatever your audio program is doing, then the UR22 will follow. So check to see, that if it's in Cubase, check to see that you have this set to like in the project setup, that you have that set to something beyond 48K. And sometimes if you're using it with other programs that are open, make sure that you're running the ASIO driver with that, and not just like the generic Windows control panel if you're on the Windows platform, or not just a generic Windows audio driver. So let us know what you find. All right, thanks for all the great discussion. Let me just, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so I think I'm back. All right, so you just see adding to my question above about installing content and updates, how do we check to see if we need to update or have missing content for Absolute or Cubase, etc.? So, you know, if once we're in the Steinberg download manager, you know, so we're the Steinberg download assistant. Okay, so let's say, you know, and so I go to Cubase Pro 11, you know, here I could see that everything is, you know, like, okay, I haven't installed this, so it says download. So here's everything that I could install that I've downloaded. I'm pretty sure it's indicated by the install. So this is still kind of resident on my computer. I never downloaded this demo track, so it says download. So that would indicate that I would need, if I wanted that, that I could download that. So at that point, you could see kind of what's been installed and what you haven't done directly from the Steinberg download assistant there. Okay, so I just see a question. I've been struggling for quite a few months now on how to get my microphone audio to head into Cubase, and none of the videos seem to work. Any ideas? So, you know, depending on your microphone, is your microphone connected to, is it a USB microphone? Is it a microphone that's connected into an audio interface? So if it's a USB microphone, you would need to go to, you go to your studio menu. We had to tell Cubase where to look for, you know, where to look for audio. So often this is going to be different than, you know, the built-in audio that you may listen to or, you know, talk into for like a Zoom meeting. But if you go to your studio setup, you can say, okay, I want to come here. Like, let's say, you know, if I wanted to record with a USB microphone, I could select my Shure MV7 here, and I could use that as my microphone. Or I wanted to connect my microphone into my Steinberg UR24C interface, then I would, you know, define. So in the studio setup and audio system, you want to define what we're capturing the audio from. So whether it's a USB mic, you want to choose it there, or we choose the Steinberg or your audio interface. We select it there. Once that has been done, all we need to do is go to your audio connections. And usually by default, it'll give you kind of a stereo in and a stereo out. So we could say, okay, and we could choose if we wanted to record a source from a microphone, let's say your voice, we could, you know, add a bus, and you can say, okay, I want a mono connection. So, and this is going to be going into input 1. Okay, so I go to an audio track. I want to add an audio track. So if I want to record from my microphone, and here we can say this is going to be a mono track. We could pick which input that we've defined. So we could say, okay, here's my mono in that I've defined, and this is going to go to our stereo out. We could give it a name. So we'll say microphone. And now we could just come right over here and record. So you want to record enable the microphone, and if you want to hear the source as you're recording, click on the monitor enable button right there. And then that's all you would need to do to record with your microphone. But if you give us a little more information on if it's a USB mic or if it's going to be a microphone that's connected to an audio interface. If it's a condenser microphone and you're connecting it to an audio interface, you may also have to turn on phantom power or 48 volts, 48V. There may be a little switch in your interface, and you may have to enable that for a condenser microphone to function. Okay, so we see just a question. Squasher kills my CPU. Any suggestions? So if you want to come over here, the first thing you do if you're having kind of CPU issues after installing plugins, if you could let us know kind of what your CPU is. But if you go to kind of your studio setup and select your audio interface, the first thing I would do is try to raise the buffer size. And, we could think of this as your buffer size, the lower the buffer, the more responsive the computer is. And the higher the buffer, but, let's say with the lower buffer, it's more responsive in terms of latency and tracking, but it takes a lot more CPU strain. So your computer has to work harder. Whereas if it is a higher buffer, your computer has kind of a lot more kind of, room to deal with all the information. You could almost envision it like a conveyor belt, where if you're, working on a factory and you had to pack a box with 4 bottles and the conveyor belt was coming, and every 4 bottles you had to pack in, that's harder to do and get a new box than to pack 16 bottles into one box. That you could get a little bit ahead and put the bottles in, and maybe by time the next batch of 16 comes, you're not doing as much work. And that's kind of how your audio interface buffers work. So try raising the buffers and see how that can, if that changes things. And if you're, just running Squasher like on a particular track, one other thing that you could do is select the track, come right over here to, and let's say you're running it as an insert. So let's say, okay, I have this on my snare top and I have the Squasher going on. One of the things you could do is just do a quick, you could render in place and render the Squasher on the particular track. So let's say if I come here to my insert, so you could also just say, okay, I have this selected. And let's say I have my inserts at the bottom here and I have this track selected. If I go to audio to direct offline processing, I could just drag the Squasher with all of its settings, and now it's just rendered onto the file, and it's just done right now. So like a whole 4-minute snare track, the Squasher is now applied to that. And at any time, so now this is just playing back an audio file. At any time I could right click, I can modify or delete that particular plugin. So there's a lot of ways of optimizing and rendering files if your computer's not, or if you have a computer that's the CPU is kind of getting squashed a bit by different plugins. All right, so we see from Kai Wen Franklin, hey Greg, is it possible to have a B flat shown in a scale list when using the chord track? When I create the scale for my song, I'm writing in B flat. I have to pick A sharp in the scale. Thanks. Yeah, it's I try to get an answer for this with the developer, and so I kind of raised it to the attention of some other people. So currently in the scale, when we do this, and I realize that this is kind of annoying. So let's say if we do have like a scale track, And I brought this up in discussion. So say we have our chord track, and I put in, a B flat, that it will show A sharp. And there isn't a way, like I could do enharmonic spellings for, where I could say, okay, let's just switch that to, I could switch this to A sharp or back to B flat, but the scale doesn't carry over with that. So I'll make sure to pass that along again because, I think it's annoying as well. See, Kai Wen Franklin says, watching Squid Game killing that Wi-Fi signal. So, yeah, it could happen. So, I had a kind of a big artist who was trying to do tracking, and he didn't realize his son was like streaming when he thought his son was in bed when he was trying to do some VST Connect, and, found out his son was watching Netflix on the iPad underneath the covers. So, it's kind of funny. All right, so we see David M. from Liverpool joining us for Enlightenment Time again. So thanks for joining and being a part of the community. All right, so I just see having issues with setting up a vocal track. Any ideas? I've checked all the tutorials, but none of them seem to work. So a lot of the stuff that I just showed with like the microphone should be applicable, but if you could let us know like what type of mic it is, what type of interface, that would be like really helpful. You see that Kush is also recommending the Nectar Panorama controller. Okay, so just see also from Angelina says she did install her NVIDIA without the game option. And just indicating when I click on the freeze button on a channel, it does not respond. Nothing happens. Thanks. So, make sure that, if you could let us know like what processing you have on it. Sometimes people will freeze just a track that has nothing on it, and that may not freeze just because there's no processing going on. So, make sure that there's processing going on because it needs something to freeze. All right, so we have a question from Jan in Stockholm. Curious question. Is there no scissor execute in the Project Logical Editor? I have no need for scissor right now. Just wondered, did I miss how to split in the Logical Editor? Thanks, Jan. So, there isn't a split MIDI note function, and we could change the length of MIDI notes. We could change the pitch, the velocity. But, a lot of times it's not, the logical editor is kind of very Boolean in that, it's like a if this, then that. So, some of the editing functions are kind of, not as applicable for the logical editor. And I can see where splitting would be one of those, but I'll pass it along as a suggestion as well. Okay, so I just see people do you use M1 Mac. So I'm currently on an i9 Mac with 32 gigs of RAM. So I think we usually have 2.5 year leases for our kind of our corporate laptops, which is just what I'm using for the live stream. So the M1 Mac wasn't out during mine, so I probably have another 9 months or so, or 8 months on my current machine. So I just see just a kind of question, I think just kind of directed towards everyone. I think it's from Kai, Kai Wen Franklin. How do you guys feel about mixing with headphones? So a lot of times, it's really, I know people that, get good results mixing on headphones. But it's really kind of, whatever you're kind of used to, but, I think speakers will tend to kind of translate better even for headphones. But, if you're kind of used to headphones, I know like when I was traveling to studios, early on, in the early 90s, I would always take my headphones as a reference that I was familiar with. All right. So we just see, can you explain in single words what ambisonic is, please? So, it allows you to kind of place, we could think of it as spherical or 360-degree audio, so that you could pan elements, not only in front, to the left or right, and to behind you as well. We see Jazz Dude doing some moderation for us, so appreciate that. Okay, so we have a question from Jan. When moving a wave event automation follow, is it possible to break? So, if I have automation going on here, and by default, like if I move the wave file, we could have the automation follow, and we could, if you don't want that, we could just, and that's usually on by default, is automation from the edit menu. Automation follows events. So now when I come here, the automation is automatically lined up to the audio event itself. But if we don't want that to be engaged, I could uncheck that. And now as I move, that the automation and the audio file are independent. Okay, I think there's a second question from Jan. If I replace a wave event with automation, will not be set to new wave event. Can Greg show automation opportunities? So let's say if I replace this audio with another event. So let's say if I'll just uncheck the automation follows event. So I'll move this event and replace it. So right now, that audio, I just took a different audio file here. Now let's say I erase this, and now the automation is still present, and I could just take another audio file and So, two, if I replace a wave event with automation, will not be set to new wave event. Can Greg show? Yeah. So I think, so once you could break that link just by turning on the automation disabling the automation follows events. So. So I just see question from Brianna. How beefy is your Apple setup? So I'll just show my About This Mac. So again, it's a 2.9 gigahertz, 6-core Intel i9 with 32 gigs of RAM. So that's kind of what my system setup is. All right, so we see some just from Dan Freeman, Focals about the Focals without a studio sub. If my stuff is played on a PA, couldn't I be unpleasantly surprised by the low end? I always use frequency and do passes at 20 hertz and 25 hertz, so it'll hopefully be low. It could really matter, but a lot of times, those subs are just kind of trying to reproduce, higher frequencies. And the sound man could just kind of bump up the EQ if it's not getting what's needed. But I've always found that stuff that sounds good on speakers that translates will work on big PA systems, will work on phones, will work on tablets, will work on a monophonic TV, will work on a radio that's being broadcast like an AM radio. So I think if your mix is right, it's gonna, if you don't have mixing in those subs, that you'll be fine. I think that often people that mix in subs then don't have enough low end when the mix is sent out, and people are expecting to kind of beef up the low end, and if it's too much or not enough, then you could have kind of worse effects. Okay, so we just see Michael Teams just mentioning, so he used his 4-track to transfer 4-track tape demos until it just mechanically wore out. So the system that moved the heads just quit working one day. Bummer. So yeah, it's always a bummer when tape machines just kind of stop working. All right, so we see I pray Cubase 12 does not require a faster computer. Apple is knocking folks over the need with these prices for their hardware. I might have to go back to building PCs. So generally, I think what you see with Steinberg is, every version gets a little more optimized. Sometimes you may get additional features that, plugins that might take, that can take a lot of CPU resources. But overall, I think as we do, as a trend, every time that there's a new version, that there's always, significant optimizations going on. All right, so we just see lots of people discussing broken down tape machines and buying other ones. All right, so we have a question. Greg, is there any way to audio free warp more than one track at once? If I do group editing, it doesn't work. So currently it's designed for one track at a time. I know it's a very common feature request. Hopefully we'll see it coming in the future. But I know that the planning and development team is very aware of the desire for that feature. So, but currently it's kind of designed to work as a single track. Yeah, and Roger's just saying, we met right after I graduated from college, which is true. So. And Cubase Junkies just mentioning for your newcomers, don't forget that Cubase has a soft clippers, great for making your drums stick out in your mix. That's a Okay, so we have a question. How do you change BPM of just a part of a song? Let's say your drums, guitar, and bass recorded and you can't retrack and you decide you want to change the BPM of a chorus later and make the tempo faster. All right, so we'll just do it on this project. So, once we have kind of, as the audio is recorded into Cubase, it will be basically tempo stamped. So all you have to do is to put that into musical mode. And once it's in musical mode, it will follow tempo changes. So let's say we have like our backing track here. So let's say, okay, we're at 100 beats a minute. So I'm going to just activate. So I could select all of my tracks and just go to musical mode right here and make sure that they're set to musical mode. And when you see that, you'll see like a little quarter note and this little squiggly line in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to come over here and add a tempo track. And this is a great trick to do for MIDI too. It's just like make the chorus 2 beats a minute faster, make the bridge a beat per minute slower, just kind of add some different tension. So let's say we'll start off at, 100 beats a minute. So I'm going to activate my tempo track. So let's say. So let's say right there, that downbeat, I want to increase the tempo. So I'm going to come right over here and I just go to the tempo track and there's this little hidden thing. So we can say step or ramp. So I'm going to say step and I'm going to say, okay, we're just going to speed up right there. And then when we're going to slow down a little bit here and then go back to, and you can see the tempo value as you go to add it in. So let's say we're at 100 beats a minute. So you could add more energy in the track. And you can just kind of change the feel, just doing very subtle tempo changes. So, make that track breathe a little bit. And, you'll notice that great band tracks will just kind of do this. This may be a little extreme, but we'll have those little subtle tempo changes to kind of add that tension into the feel of a track. So just make sure all the tracks have a tempo value. So if they were recorded in Cubase, they will have that already. Select all the tracks and then just place them all into musical mode and you'll be all set. And then you could, freely change the tempo anytime you want. So. All right, we're doing well in time. Thanks for all the great questions. Again, if you've learned something new, make sure to hit the actual like button an odd number of times. Don't hit it twice because that will cancel your like. So. Okay, so Reading through comments. All right, lost my place. Let me just see if I can. All right, so I think I'm back. See some discussion of basses. So, you know, see that jazz dude plays a Ludic, a Leduc, same as Abraham Laboriel uses. So, yeah, he's such a sweet guy. I got to meet him at Yamaha office one day. He came in with Jim Keltner to show off some cymbals or something. That day didn't suck. All right, so we just see, Greg, what OS am I running on my Mac? So I just recently updated to just yesterday to Big Sur, version 11.6. So just updated yesterday. This is my first live stream with the new OS. Things had to get kind of woken up, but it seems to be working okay. Okay, so we have a question. Can you show me how to set line fader 1 and 2 like modulation and expression? I'm using a Nectar panoramic controller. Okay, so you see line fader 1 and how to set line fader 1 and 2 to like modulation and expression. So, you know, a lot of times, let's say, so if I wanted modulation, okay. So, you know, obviously you can have, you know, modulation with the mod wheel. So I'm just going to I'll just come here and go to my MIDI inserts. So, you know, if I go to my MIDI monitor, you know, I could move my MIDI. Let's see, my modulation isn't outputting anything right now. So, you know, but let's say if I move fader 1, okay, so I'll just try that again. Let me just try it on a new, just add an instrument track here. Okay, so now when I come over here to my MIDI monitor, so it should be showing. Okay, so let's say I just wanted like my fader here. This is like my knob. I have controller 32 and 33. So, you know, you can set that up in the, you know, directly in the Nectar panorama if you wanted to do, you know, to switch the faders to be, you know, controller 1 and controller, you know, 11, you know, so but you could also set up, you know, if you need to do it in Cubase, you could say, okay, like on this particular track, we could say we're going to take controller, So right now this is controller 32. So I want controller 32, and we're going to take value 1 of that and okay, so I'm going to say we're going to add controller, and we'll say value 1 is we're going to subtract. So we're at controller 32, and I want this to do controller 1, so I'm going to say subtract 31. So now when I move this particular function, it'll just do, you know, we could just take that particular controller and subtract, you know, just doing just like that. So at that point, we could choose to have different controls and subtract, but, you know, within the Nectar, you could choose what MIDI CC is actually being transmitted out. Okay, so we have a question. Just wondered how to arrange the plugin list. You know, for example, got a saturation plugin in a dynamic section. How can I move it to distortion section, please? So when we do this, we could, you know, very easily come over here to Studio menu to VST Plugin Manager. You could click on Add. You could click on the plus sign here, and that we could add an empty one, or we could actually just come here and say, okay, I want to copy the current collection. So we'll call this October 22nd. Okay, so now what I could do is say, okay, let's say I wanted to move a plugin from distortion. I could just say delete my brick wall limiter from here, and I wanted to put the brick wall limiter in the distortion category. So you could freely kind of move all of the plugins in your collection and organize it however you see fit. And again, that's from your Studio menu to VST Plugin Manager. And you could start by just, you know, copying or, you know, organizing all of your own plugins just as you see fit directly there. And then if I wanted to just switch between them, I could just say, okay, let's go back to my default. And so that way you could organize your VST effects and all your VST instruments as you see fit. I see Michael Teams just mentioning he has his old Roland 880 and 1680 hard disk recorders. So. So let's see, from Jariah, so Greg's setup is a bit larger than what the guys used on the Moon Apollo missions. Yeah, so I know the Apollo missions were on 16K computers, and my dad worked on those. He was a smart guy. All right, so we just see is a delete automation feature in the project logical editor working properly for everyone. All right, so let's take a look. I'll just link a bunch of tracks together here and do some horrible automation. All right, so now we have horrific automation. I will hide this and let's open up more automation lanes. All right, let me just come here. I'll just automate place all these tracks into automation. I'll write a bunch of additional unnecessary automation. Okay, so let's say, all right, so we have automation across kind of all the tracks. Let's go to the project logical editor. And we'll say we want to delete media type is equal to automation. So it seems like that worked. So one thing, that's tempo information there. But one thing to make sure is, like, you know, if you have something selected, it may delete automation on the selected part only. So if we don't have anything selected, it will kind of do it globally. But if you have, like, you know, a particular event selected, that may override the selection and just delete automation in that particular area. So let's say, you know, once again here, we have lots of automation going on that, you know, so let's say I'll just, again, so automation across all the different tracks. It will show used automation, and so click here. So nothing is selected. Delete media type is equal to automation, and all gone. So, but just make sure that, like, your selection could be critical with that. Okay, so we see from Greg, is there any way to tell which VSTs are 32-bit and 64-bit in Cubase? I'm thinking of jumping into Big Sur, at least with Catalina. I'm scared to lose access to my 32-bit stuff. So, you know, your 32-bit plugins haven't worked in Cubase since version 8.5 or 8. So I think you're fine. You know, so if it's currently working in Cubase, then you don't have to worry about jumping to Big Sur for plugin sake. So, you know, because Cubase hasn't used 32-bit plugins in a while. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, reading through comments. So thanks for all the great discussion and great questions. Okay, so we see, can you explain tempo definition and when to use them? All right, so I think when we come over here, you know, if I select an audio file at this stage and we go to So I think it's probably maybe the tempo definition kind of in the pool window here. So if this is kind of what you're doing, so if this is what you mean by the tempo definition. So, what that is that the file, will have a tempo stamp. So if you want to speed it up like we did in this project where, when it kicks in, we could bump it up, 3 beats per minute or change the tempo freely. Once that tempo has been defined, now sometimes you may do this also. So let's say if we come over here to advanced, so, you may have audio files that, vary in tempo. So when I come over here, so let's say I go to this particular project, and we do a tempo detection, that what I'm going to do now is it's not going to be a steady single value for tempo on the audio file. So I'm going to do my tempo detection here. You see that this audio file, we can have the tempo done. So as we listen to it now, instead of this file having a single tempo value when it's clearly fluctuating in tempo, that we could, the tempo definition, I think it might be what you're referring to, is taking the metadata of the tempo changes of each beat of the audio file and assigning that tempo to that beat, so that I could take this particular audio file that is fluctuating in tempo. I could select that, go to here, and I'll say, let's go to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. So now that we do this, and we could store it in the project or in the actual audio file itself, I could play back, and instead of it following the tempo, I could say, okay, let's just play it at 120 beats a minute, but steady. But we could do this only accurately because we know what the original tempo definition is. So say 156. Or if I wanted to even just alter and say, okay, I wanted to select the tempo here and raise it up. So I believe, what you might be asking about is, an audio file that has multiple tempos defined, and that could be the tempo definition, I think. Okay, so we see a question is about UR28M. Do I need to make sure my tools are off in device while using Cubase 11 Pro while recording or mixing? So I don't think so. So when you're using the UR28M, you could have the DSP set. From here, so you'll see like the audio hardware settings. I think it shows up under more options now. And I don't have that particular interface, connected, so it's slightly different, but you don't have to turn any of it off while you're mixing. So you see, Greg, I'm wondering why Steinberg does not create a feature in a program that could be a how-to screen that would point to videos about some of the most asked questions in Cubase. It could be, it seems like a simple thing, but, as we put that code in, it takes a lot of time to do. It takes a lot of development resources, as people always want, their particular features to get implemented. So, it would only be at the expense of introducing, particular, it would be at the expense of introducing new features that are often desired by users to implement that. You know, I think in the FAQs, the team has taken a lot of stuff that Ted Springman has generated, so that when you go to like an FAQ on the website, it could link to a video. And, you know, I'll always use, you know, cubaseindex.com as well. But I think if you kind of follow, you know, all the videos that are created for different DAWs, that, you know, Steinberg, you know, does a really great job of multiple people, you know, contributing different perspectives and workflows and how to get your Cubase working better for you. And hopefully this series is helpful as well. But, you know, it seems like a simple thing, but I think most people tend to, you know, would just, you know, tend to, you know, Google and YouTube and have it take you directly there. And there's always a chance that, you know, there's a version and this particular link, you know, as a workaround is not needed anymore with, you know, a 0.41 update. So, you know, in keeping track of all that, you know, takes a lot of time and effort that could be utilized for some other things. Okay, see, Roger Hooper is having to check out. So thanks for joining the live stream, Roger. It's great to have you on. I'll try to give you a call over the weekend just to catch up. Hope you and Becky are well. Right, reading through more comments and questions. So. Okay, so I just see, can you please show me what to do if I'm going to record several takes with drums so there won't be 1 million MIDI signals on the same track? So I'm not sure if it's audio, I guess it's MIDI, but let's go ahead and just take a look. So. Okay, so I'll just revert this project here real quick. Okay, so let's say I just want to do multiple MIDI, record several takes. So I assume this is going to be on kind of the same part. So a bit sorry if I misunderstand. Let me just. All right, so one thing that often a default mode that could kind of throw people off is, let's say, okay, I'm here. Okay, let me just adjust. I think I may have panned this from last live stream. Okay, so let's say I want to put this like in a loop recording. So let's say, okay, I just want to do multiple passes. So I'm going to switch my my record mode here to merge instead of new parts. Okay, so now I could just come right over here. So let's say I just want to. All right, so let's say I have my kick, and now I want to put snare. So now when we look at this, we can see that they're all going to just, show up directly in. Sorry, I have like really, my keyboard is covered here, so this would be a horrible hi-hat. So this way they all kind of show up as one part. And if you don't have it set to merge, it may just kind of create like each recording may be kind of stacked on top. So if you run into that, the trick is, if you wanted to consolidate all of those, is just to come over here. So say, okay. Okay, so now I'll record again. And I'm going to switch my MIDI record mode, sorry about that, before I waste everyone's time, to new parts. So now I could have like, parts that are kind of on top of other parts, and that's why we see these kind of diagonal lines. So if you wanted to merge these, what you could do is just hold down the glue gun here and hold down the Alt or Option key, and that will kind of merge all of the parts together into one part. So let me know if was kind of what you were looking to do. Okay, so just seeing from Joe K, I've seen a video when someone bounces the audio track after applying tempo definition. Why would this be? So it's often if, the audio recording had different varying tempos and you wanted the tempo to be consistent. So that's often why people would do that. All right, reading through comments. So. Okay, so we see, can you explain, maybe show the difference between musical mode versus musical time base and linear time base, especially an impact on audio files like a drum recording? Okay, so. Okay, so, audio files can be in musical mode. So let's say we have this, this drum loop here. So right now, if I listen to this drum loop and we'll play with the click, the two aren't aligned up. So the event could be placed into musical mode. So if I switch this to musical mode, now the drum loop will speed up to match the tempo of the particular track. So now when I play, and if I just slow this down, let's say 108. So it's just going to match kind of the different timing. So musical mode on the event will have that event followed, especially with audio, to automatically follow the tempo. Now, if I have events, now the tracks themselves can be in linear or musical mode. So let's say I looked at this event here and I add a ruler track. And as we add a ruler track, I want this to be set up for seconds. Okay, so we see that we're roughly a little less than 9 seconds for this drum loop. So now if I change, let's say I start this at roughly around 5 seconds. So now when a track is in musical mode, I change the tempo. This will stay at the same bar position, say measure 3, but we'll see the time change. So we'll see the event. So as I adjust the tempo, we see the events, the bar and beat staying the same, but the time changing. Okay, so we see that we're still at measure 3, but measure 3 is really dependent upon the time. Now, if we're in linear mode, we'll see that our time stay the same, but the actual position on the bar and beat change. So this way, any change that we make in musical mode will tie the event to the bar and beat, and changes that we make in linear mode will tie the event as tempo is changed to the actual time position. Hang on just one second. My son just got home. All right, I'm back. Sorry about the interruption. All right. Okay, reading through more comments here. Okay, so we have a question from Joe K. Yes, that answered my tempo definition question. Does that metadata show up in a pool, or does it only show a single BPM? So it's only going to indicate a single BPM, but you can have it, because it could actually be saved in the project or within the file itself. But in the pool, it's only going to show a single BPM. All right, so we see from Kai Wen Franklin saying, Greg, thanks for answering all my questions. That's hopefully what we try to do, help people out. So All right, so I just see from Dan Freeman, my dot waves don't show the length of song, and should I be adding more info than just the name? So let's say if I come here, so I'm not sure if this is, so I'm not sure if I kind of understand if it's like, if you're seeing like the name of audio files like this that don't show, but, with the, a lot of times, as you record audio in, just the name of the file will automatically be extracted from the name of the track. And, you could add more information in the description. But if you needed to add more information for the name, if you go into Media Bay, you can just, kind of come over here to any of the files, and you could go to the, right here, and there's lots of different metadata fields that you could add in. But I don't think I'm understanding your question, Dan, unfortunately. Sorry about that. So we see Kai Wen Franklin just saying, what I mean is the questions you've answered here for us. It'd be nice to have a screen where you could go in the app and you could just answer questions. So, maybe they could link to Jan's Cubase index, but, I do send the index of all the topics covered in the live streams every month over to Steinberg as well. So. All right, great to see Mandy Lane on the live stream. Okay, so we just see, so from Pedro, when you set the project signature to 7/8, is it possible to use the Groove Agent pattern set to 7/8 instead of its default 4/4, 12/8, etc.? So Groove Agent won't necessarily, it won't turn your 4/4 pattern into 7/8 when you switch time signature. So it'll still kind of play back 4/4, so it may not automatically fit as expected or as desired. Okay, so I know we had some questions that were mailed in, so let me get to some of those before we run out of time. Thanks for all the great discussion so far. And again, if you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Okay, so we had a question, how to save user-created track presets for easy access in the right zone media bay. All right, so there's two ways we could do this. So let's say I go to my media bay. You could go to user presets and see your track presets directly there. And once you have these track presets, so let's say I have this, I could come over here and just drag and drop the track presets directly onto the events. Another method, if you don't want to necessarily go down a couple of levels, is if we go to the media bay and we'll come over here and you'll see a whole user content. So at this point, what I could do is right click here and I'll just say add favorites. So if I wanted to access kind of all of my favorite or all of my user created content easily. So I'll just say, okay, here's my user content. So I'll hit OK. So now when I go to Media Bay here, I'll go home. I just go to favorites, and then all of my user content will just be here. So I could just see everything just kind of laid out for me there. So I can say, okay, let's look at, track presets. So once I'm here, there's all my track presets, and we could just drag these track presets directly over and create new tracks just like that. So once you have that set up, go to the media bay here and, just right click, and you could just add the user content or all of your track presets. So if I wanted this to be all of my track presets, I could come right here and let's just add to favorites. So, and now I could just go directly to my track presets right here and see all of my track presets and just drag and drop any of those presets directly over. So, okay. So we see most of the music that I write has several choppy quick chords. Some 2 or 3 chords per measure. Is it possible to have a chord track that is just a 16th or an 8th on the grid? Okay, so there's a plugin called Chopper, which could probably do this. So let's take a look. Okay, when I jump here. Okay. So let's say I have, let me revert this. Okay, so I will, let's say we have something that sounds like this. So maybe I have a drum loop. I have a chord track, and I want the chord track to just kind of play. So the chord track is now triggering the synth sounds. But it's just gonna kind of hold like whole notes until. But what I want to do is just to come over here and put the chopper plugin in. Under modulation. And I'll just say, okay, let's make this so I could just kind of come here and just take what was, and you could have different rhythmic values if you want it. And different rhythmic values. So you say, okay, I want this to be 8th note triplets. I mean, if you wanted to mix between the two. So that's an easy way of, there's not even any notes in there. It's just taking, just that, and, it's this track right here that's just sounding the chord. The chord track is just being monitored through this and running it through the chopper plugin. And then you could adjust kind of the blend here. So if you're on a really choppy. So that's kind of a cool little trick you could use. All right, so we had a question sent in from Ronnie. So I thought I followed every step of your instructions on 1019 for quantizing to a groove. When I opened a quantize panel, I saw from quantize settings down, not warp marker creation rules. As in your explanation, I must be doing something wrong. What is it? So a lot of times, you know, if you're doing this, let's say I wanted to quantize maybe like 2 drum parts to each other. So like, let's say these aren't really happening. So, you know, when we see this, a lot of times, if you want it to work, you know, with the quantized, and it's going to be done not in a quantized panel, Ronnie, but if you come over here to the hit points. So at this point, we could say create warp markers from the hit points. So we could just come over here and adjust a threshold accordingly. So let's say, okay, I want that as my threshold, and now I could create warp markers, and then, you know, you could kind of freely quantize different elements, but here you can also say create groove. So at this point, if I want to take the groove of this top drum loop, or this top audio file, and apply it to this file, let's say, I'll just put this into. So if I play these two together, it's a little bit off rhythmically, but I could select this one. And if you just enable kind of audio warp quantize right here, I could now say we want to do it from this particular groove that we extracted from that one, and I'll hit Q. And then those two are kind of locked up. But I think if you're missing the step, make sure that you're going into the hit points in the sample editor, and that you're creating the warp markers or creating the groove directly from there. All right. So we just see trying to tune drums in Superior Drummer 3. Their nomenclature is different. We're -1, semicolon 02.5 means the drum is detuned 1 octave, 2 semitones, and 50 cents, or 1/2 of 1 semitone. There's a process button to create a high quality sample. Then I render the song with reverb. Then I choose to edit in Vary Audio and hopefully the dominant note. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I've tried compression before and after the verb. It hasn't helped. The snare I'm using doesn't have samples with the snare turned off. It seems the default snare tuning is 82. Detuning to -2, 2 semitones or 1 tone seems to show A2. Detuning -4 seems to show D2, but not as many notes. All right, so I think I just got your email, Sable. I'll go ahead and send that over to you in a bit. And tuning up semitones 1 tone doesn't allow Cubase to find more than 2 random notes. I would guess further, sometimes doing it by default. So let's go ahead and take a listen to kind of the snare here. So just solo this. So we had kind of the snare not being tuned. All right, and now we have this tuned down to A. So when we look at this in Vary Audio Editor, all right, so we can see it's roughly going to be, and now when we do our analysis here on this file, we can see that this particular file, when we look at it, we'll show it down to like A2. And then when we go to listen to like the next ones with kind of some more tuning, there's a lot more processing going on. So, if we listen now to the snare samples, and we do the analysis here, we're not really seeing this. And, there's a lot of, that's almost kind of like with the overtones that are going on in that particular one. You don't have like a single pitch if you kind of listen to it. There's a lot more kind of information, especially with the reverb. So the reverb may be kind of causing problems, but if you actually kind of take like a particular sample from this, I would try to do all of the processing kind of, sans reverb before you do pitch shifting, because then you're kind of pitch shifting to reverb, and that may not be getting you where you want to go. But I'm going to just, let's take this into Groove Agent, so like even like Groove Agent and Backbone have the full version of Groove Agent will have the ability to decompose sound. So let's say if I drag this loop here, and a lot of times some different drum programs like Backbone or the full Groove Agent will allow you to, come over here and choose to, we could pre-listen to kind of the different parts. But let's say if I apply this, that you could have kind of a noise part of the sample. So let's say if I trigger this, we could have the noise part, but you could also just have kind of the snare tonal part. So you could kind of break these down. So let's say I wanted to get rid of the noise, and I can make the tonal, let's say, louder here. So you may have to, there's tools specifically for this. So if I wanted to now apply just the noise to kind of break these two. So you can see that there's a lot of, noise from the reverb that's going to be, present there. So you could solo the different components and, be able to just say, okay, that's the noise part. So I think that it's probably going to be just a lot of the reverb that's going to be causing it. But, there's a lot of, that snare tone, is actually like kind of more multiple pitches with how it's being processed. So it's almost kind of like a chord in of itself when you play it. All right, so that was questions that were kind of mailed in. Let me jump back to, sorry about this, I'll pause that. All right, let me jump back to our discussion, see how we're doing on time. All right, so we got about 5 minutes left. Let's see if we get a couple more questions in. And thanks everyone for wonderful discussion and questions. And if you have learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe to it. And remember, next Friday will be the last live stream of the month already. So we'll be having our Zoom meetup. So for Tuesday's live stream, I will have the Zoom link, or if you send me an email, I'll be happy to send a link to the Zoom meeting. So all right, so we see that we have 1,000 people on the Cubase Nation Discord. That's great. Okay, so I just see from Mandy Lane, I recently made a remake and quantized the hi-hats too much swing, messed up the track a little. You have to be careful about it. So yeah, if you ever get to that state, Mandy, one of the things you could do is under the advanced quantize is, or if you go to, let me just select something with MIDI in it here real quick. So depending on if you're doing audio or MIDI, but if you go to, There is a reset quantize function as well. So you could just hit reset quantize and that'll take you back to the original state. So if you ever get too quantized for your own good, you could go back to the original state. Okay, reading through more comments. So we just see a comment from Thermonuclear War and live music like jazz never quantize notes. So a lot of times the musicians will quantize to each other. So it's called a swing or groove. Okay, so I just see I have a client I'm tracking. They have 6 songs. Their tracks don't stop. They have music that drones into the next song, so there is not dead air. How would you approach mastering bouncing these tracks? So you could just simply bounce out. Like I have a project I did in Wavelab. Let's see how we're doing on time. So, but you could do it in Wavelab and have CD markers, and we could show that on Tuesday's live stream. I see that we're just about out of time, but you could definitely do that. And I think we may have showed it on Tuesday or last Friday's live stream. So if you want to go to check the index there. But I want to thank everyone for spending your afternoon here or evening checking out the Club Cubase live stream. Once again, next Friday, we'll be doing a 2-hour live stream with the Zoom meetup. And so we hope that and that's just a way for people to meet each other. It's always great discussions. I'll try to have a special guest for Friday's live stream. But I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone on Tuesday. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend.